Few more people logging in. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started now as people have still logging in. But welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Catherine Soto Vasquez. I have Landon here and Rich. If you all want to go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. I know it's a smaller group today. I think that's always helpful for us to just track who's here. But yeah, so we have a couple of presentations today. We have Chris Clark here with Environmental Services, who will be reviewing the city encampment report with us and kind of just tracking back for, I believe it's the last quarter, right, Chris? Of encampments that have been reported throughout the city. And he'll review kind of the different regions and what activity is taking place throughout the city. And then the second half, we will be reporting and sharing the shelter survey results that SBAC just completed throughout or in partnership with some of the shelters here in town. We've shared that in our housing and shelter working group and with the county's interim housing working group as well. But we now wanted to share that broadly with the community and business partners as well, and just have a discussion around that and kind of some next steps that we're hoping to have with those results. So with that all being said, Chris, I think we're gonna hand it over to you now.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to see about sharing my screen here. Let's see. That one right there. Okay. Oops. Back to the beginning here. Giving it all away. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Clark. I'm an environmental services specialist at the City of Santa Barbara's Environmental Services Division. And I'm going to give you our quarterly update on our encampment response data that we've collected. So without further ado, let's get going. So the objectives we have here for our program is to process public reports, and that's from the public and from city staff, related to encampments, individuals in need, and abandoned shopping carts, along with a few other reports of kind of abandoned waste and that sort of thing. We want to improve our data collection, tracking of reports, and our client outreach activities, provide outside partner agencies with access to their non-confidential real-time information, have data-driven improvements to our programs, and move more towards proactive actions to reduce the impacts of homelessness on the community and our general reliance on public reporting. We want to get out and deal with the problems before they become an impact. Our city's encampment response team, we have several different divisions and departments throughout the city: environmental services, parks, creeks, housing and human services, police department, fire department, and streets division, whom we all partner with. We also work with several outside agencies that we make referrals to and work in conjunction with, including the County of Santa Barbara, Caltrans, City Goleta, Union Pacific Railroad, and CityNet, who is our outreach contractor for the city. How our system works is we can get reports that come in either through a web form or through our hotline number. And we'll be sure to throw that link into the chat for you after this. Those reports are processed by our staff and then distributed out to the correct department or division to handle the outreach, cleanup, etc. I do also like to always point out that we make all of our online forms in both English and Spanish, and you can find the link to switch to the Spanish version of the form at the bottom of the reporting form landing page. The kind of really important part of how we take in information is we work on a GIS-based system, which allows people to report precisely where an issue is. And this makes it so that we are much more quickly able to get the right resources and make our response much more efficient. And Again, this reporting form is available both on your desktop computer, mobile devices, etc. We also are interested in continuing to make more and more of our data available to the public. This past year, we published our Clean SB dashboard, which has information that is updated hopefully quarterly. Still working on how that system is going to work exactly, but we hope to eventually get so that it is a real-time dashboard. So as soon as a report comes in, you're going to be able, if you submitted the report, you're going to be able to look on the dashboard and kind of get an update on what's going on with my report, that kind of thing. But it is available right now on our sustainability website. And you can look back into the past, back to 2019, beginning of this program, and see all of the data that we've collected thus far. So to get started with some of our numbers for this past fiscal quarter, so July through September, we have 393 reports come in through the system, compared to, sorry, that should be FY22 quarter 4. So the previous quarter before that, it was 355. We've gone up a little bit over the summer, which is usually typical for what we see. Breakdown of the issues: we had 193 inhabited encampments reported, 28 uninhabited encampments reported, 108 abandoned shopping carts, which is a relatively new program that our office has been tasked with, and then 60 for other reports, litter, abandoned items, other things that are somewhat related to what we're doing here. The status of all of those various reports: as you can see, we have none that are pending. All of them right now are being processed the same business day that they are received. So if it comes in on a Sunday night, it's going to be processed on Monday. If it comes in Monday afternoon, it's going to be processed Monday afternoon. We have 2 code enforcement officers who work Monday through Friday, managing, taking in the reports, processing them, and getting the correct resources out to get things started. So 242 of those are completed, closed. There's no further actions that need to be taken on those. 151 of those are in progress. It means we've taken an action on it. We've started outreach. We've started cleanup. We're in somewhere in the process of it. Sometimes those will linger on there, mainly because the last step is for us to pay our contractors. So there may just be invoices that aren't resolved all the way. And then we also process individual and need reports, but we don't share the location data for that. But we had 48 individual need requests submitted through the system. Looking at individual RAP locations now. So for the Upper State Street RAP, we had 41 total reports, 7 inhabited encampments, 2 uninhabited encampments, 30 abandoned shopping carts, and 2 others. One thing that I noticed while I was processing this data and compared to previous data is the number of uninhabited encampment reports has diminished in a very large way. And I'm going to fiddle around with those numbers and hopefully in the next report be able to show you compared to a year ago what that looked like, because that is a fraction of what things used to be. All the inhabited encampments, depending on where we are, kind of stayed the same or gone down some, but what that tells me that the uninhabited encampment numbers have gone down is that we are getting things cleaned up before they're becoming abandoned, which is great. That means we have less trash and debris sitting out in the environment for less time, which is good. Waterfront reports. We had 71 total reports, 53 inhabited encampments, 2 uninhabited encampments, 11 abandoned shopping carts, and 5 others. The waterfront continues to be one of the more active locations. But if you look at the map, you can see a lot of it does run along the freeway, railroad corridor, and specific neighborhoods around that. And I do want to encourage everyone, if you live in these neighborhoods and you're looking at these maps and you're thinking, gosh, these guys are not getting this one street that I know there's stuff on there, please make sure to make that report to us so that we know to go out there and take care of it. Because that's what we want to do. For Alameda Park, 5 reports. Parks Department handles most of the issues in there, so not too many things actually come through us. Next one. State Street report, 76. 45 inhabited encampments, 3 uninhabited, 18 abandoned shopping carts, and 10 other issues. Again, you can look at the freeway there, and Mission Creek also runs right along the freeway. That's where we're finding the majority of the issues. East Side reports, we have 47 total reports, 24 inhabited encampments, 4 uninhabited, 15 shopping carts, and 4 others. We have Sycamore Creek that runs through the east side, and a lot of those encampments that are running right down the middle are running right along the creek. Our Creeks Division does a great job taking care of those. And again, also looking at areas along the freeway tend to have more activity. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, and I have a couple other of our office staff available as well. Check the.
Chris, are you able to speak to the trends within each of those neighborhoods? I know you mentioned the change in the Upper State Street neighborhood.
Yeah, don't have the numbers to pull up in front of me, but I can say that the Upper State, and I'll actually put that presentation back up 1 second. Jump over to Upper State. So Upper State in general, the reason the numbers are so high is because of the abandoned shopping carts. We look at the number of encampments, inhabited and uninhabited, relatively low. That's been the trend for that area. We started gathering data for this location during the hotel project. Haven't seen a whole lot of change in terms of the number of encampments. And again, these tend to be along the freeway, tend to be along creek corridors and things like that. But we do get a lot of reports of abandoned shopping carts in this area. So please do keep an eye out for those. Let's see, I think there was sorry, I'm trying to locate the chat. I think there was a question in the chat. For the numbers of reports unduplicated or some repeats. So we did exclude duplicates from these numbers. So these are the unduplicated reports. So the actual number of reports that came in is higher than this. But we went ahead and these are unique reports of individual locations.
Okay.
And then I think we had someone raise.
Yeah.
Councilmember Friedman raised his hand, I think. I'm not able to see all of them, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. Apologies for being a couple minutes late. Just had a question on the Upper State Street. Maybe you covered it, but the old Meineke building, they're out, and so it's become a larger issue up there. And I'm just wondering if you've received any reports on that, or if you've been able to reach out to maybe the owners of the property. It seems to be growing, and it's right there in a highly visible intersection, but it seems to be creating a lot of issues as it continues to grow.
I'll turn over to one of our code enforcement officers. Joao, have you had any reports at that location?
I have not, actually.
Okay. Well, then we'll add that to our to-do list and check it out.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's just they suddenly went out of business, and within a couple of days, it started with mattresses and you can see all kinds of stuff, and it's a busy intersection. So, and I'm sure there's trash and sanitary issues around that whole property, but there's businesses right next to it that are still operating. So if we can just take a look at it and see what's going on there, because it's going to get bigger unless we kind of try to do something about it. So appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, Chris, Mike Jordan, I got a question too.
Sure.
When you steer people towards the reporting site, is there any worry to really worry about the difference between one person camping versus a bunch of people camping in the way you put it? I mean, if you put it as an encampment, if it's one person who's taken over an MTD bench for a month versus a bunch of people under trees, does it all go to the same place?
Yeah, it all gets processed by our code enforcement staff for encampment reports. Housing and Human Services takes care of the individual need reports. As far as whether it's a single individual, multiple individuals, a small camp, a large camp, we want to know about all of it.
Okay,
If there are specific concerns related to that encampment, we want to know those too. Give us
Okay.
details. We'd like
but
more
I mean, if
information.
somebody took over an MTD bench with a sleeping bag for a month and somebody put that into the encampment part of the link, that's okay, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
We'll sort it all out.
And then Chris, I think there's another question in the chat regarding abandoned shopping carts. If when they're reported and then someone is going out to retrieve them, is there personal items in them?
Sure. Yeah. Our process for responding to abandoned shopping carts is based on our municipal code. We have a section on it. And if a cart does not contain any personal items, the cart owner is notified and they have 72 hours to retrieve it, after which we will impound it and hold it, and they have to pay a fee for it to be released. If it has personal items in it, it is first posted with a 72-hour notice for the items owners to retrieve their property from the cart. After that 72 hours, then the cart owner is notified, and there's a 72-hour window for the cart owner to come and retrieve their cart. After the first 72-hour notice for the items, our contractor goes through and will dispose of anything that is deemed to be waste and keep anything that is of value. Just like if it was an encampment, we treat it the same way.
And then I had a question regarding Alameda, since that's Parks and Recs, and you said, so if there's a report that goes directly to Parks and Recs, or because you mentioned something around kind of it's funneled through them first.
Yeah, so the data that's reported here is anything that came through our system.
Okay.
But for most of the things going on at Alameda Park, those things are going to be going directly either to park staff or park rangers. They may not necessarily come through our system and therefore are not reflected in this data. So we do know that there are issues going on at Alameda Park, but the Parks Department is handling those things directly, not necessarily coming through our system. But we always want to encourage everyone, if there are encampments or individuals in need in and around Alameda Park, feel free to use our encampment and individual needs reporting system. We will get it to the right people.
Great. Thank you. And then if there are no other questions, we were also hoping to have some updates from our outreach providers. We have CityNet and Good Samaritan here that could speak to also kind of the reports that they receive, or CityNet specifically, the reports that are receiving from the city and kind of how they're responding and just some of their recent work throughout the city. So Al, if you'd like to go first.
Yes, hello everyone. Al over here with CityNet. I'm the regional program supervisor. So right now with the city, we have 2 full-time outreach workers that cover the city of Santa Barbara. Just to jump off what I was going to go over, we have provided outreach out there to Meineke. And like I said, we'll be following up on them. Many of them have denied services, but as we all know, it's not a first time. We don't expect everyone to accept the service on the first time, so we will be following up with that area. But then, of course, getting back into what I was going to say, we have a close collaboration with the city, and we work directly off the encampment lead along with working with SB Act, providing outreach and calls for service. So there's multiple areas that we get information from to provide the outreach to the city. Just in the encampment league, like I said, within the past quarter, we've done over 80, calls for service and, went out there and provided the outreach through the encampment league. Besides that, we go to all 3 neighborhood navigation centers. With the neighborhood navigation centers, just some data that we were able to pull up. The number of clients we've engaged in that are CityNet clients just at the community lot, we have 7 that we've engaged in there. The Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, we've had 11 current clients, and at Alameda Park, we've had 12. Now, non-clients that are have been engaged with CityNet through these 3 sites, we've had 26 at the commuter lot, 30 at Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, and this is from July 1st through September 30th. And at Alameda, we've had 19. So these are non-clients that we've engaged with at these sites. And now, as far as CityNet on-site staff on each of these, we provide 2 CityNet staff for each one of these sites. And that's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Okay. Now, based off of these interactions that we've had in the commuter lot, we've had 1 relocation. Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, we had 1 housed, 2 temporary shelters, and 1 relocation. So there's been definitely a lot of success with the newest NNC site at the rescue mission. And I want to definitely give a shout out to Kevin and all the great work they're doing over there. And at Alameda Park, we've had 7 exited to temporary shelter since July 1st. Now, overall citywide, we've been able to exit to bridge housing 4, and 2 of these have been exited into detox. So that's one thing that naturally we all, come to, and a lot of times comes a conversation of, what we can do or why these concerns continue to grow or happen. And many of it, can contribute to, drug or alcohol or mental health. So we are trying to put, our time into helping these individuals get the necessary services that they're interested in, of course, and that we can provide that. Overall, citywide, we've exited 9 into temporary shelter during this time and had 2 relocations. The one thing we are, as a growing population that we have seen recently, a little bit more of amount of individuals that I guess aren't really from Santa Barbara. So we are trying to relocate them and reconnect them with their family and reunify them with friends in areas. So one thing I can tell you guys, if you guys are out there in the community or you were putting these requests for services in this link, if you have any information that, these are individuals that are new to the area, that's the first thing we want to do is find out where they're from. How can we help them? Is there friends? Is there family? Can we reunify them with them to get them back to a safe place? So with this, information that you provide, it's so important to have as much detail as possible, because when we send the outreach team out there, the more information I'm able to give them, the better. Like I said, you guys most of all have my number, and I'll put it once again in the chat. That's the quickest way to get responses, but I do thank you guys for sending me the emails as well, to be able to get the outreach out there as quickly as possible. So literally while you were talking, Councilmember Friedman, I literally just had messaged my team about the Meineke, got the update, and we'll be providing outreach services tomorrow in that area. So that's kind of how we like to work. And from there, being able to do what we can once we're on site to see what services we can get them into right then and there to try to come to a solution. But that's what I have right now as far as outreach and what we were able to provide recently.
Great. Thanks, Al. Appreciate that update. Landon, did you have your hand up for a second? Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. And then I don't know if anyone has any questions specifically to Al for CityNet. If not, I will hand it over to Anais with Good Samaritan so she can give us an update about her team and the efforts that she has going on countywide and throughout the city.
Good afternoon. This is Anais with the Good Samaritan Shelter, Outreach Program Manager. And I just wanted to give a quick review of what our teams are doing. We have a team in Santa Maria. We have a team in Lompoc. We have a team in Santa Barbara Carp. And we also have a team that also focuses in Goleta and IV. So we're pretty spread out in the Santa Barbara County, but we're super excited to do all of the county all together. In total right now, we have approximately 127 clients that we've been able to engage, and that's in all of the regions. I know that in Santa Barbara, we've been able to engage clients, whether it's at the navigation centers, the commuter lots, rescue mission, Alameda Park, excuse me, the syringe exchange programs with Pacific Pride Foundation has been wonderful. We're also doing specific outreach in Carpinteria right now. We've been working on relocations. We've taken a couple of our higher need clients to the hospital in urgent cares after being able to build rapport with them. We've been really working collectively in all regions to really focus on document readiness, because that seems to be a really big one. So we're doing a lot of basic things right now. So a lot of driver's license, taking them to the DMV, a lot of birth certificates, a lot of like EBT and Medi-Cal and health insurance applications that were not previously done. We do focus a lot in the, like I said, in Alameda, the waterfront. Yeah, so we are finally fully staffed, which was, I think, a little bit of a hindrance in the beginning. But now we have, in addition, we have an AmeriCorps staff with us now that's just wonderful. So being able to really focus all the way from Goleta to Carp has been wonderful. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Anais. And I also just want to, in working with CityNet and Good Samaritan around some of the needs throughout the city, just kind of attest to their ability to just work together. And even though CityNet's primarily contracted with the city, it's great to see the collaboration take place amongst all of the outreach providers, the new outreach providers that are in the area. I think it's reassuring to just see them work together and the care that they have for the clients. And then I see Jonathan on here, and this is last minute, so I don't want to put you on the spot. If you wanted to give an update on Pat's new outreach specialist, Odin, how he's joined your team, and just a quick update for everyone.
Sure. Hi, everybody. And I apologize, I'm going to have to jump off right after this update. But yeah, we're very excited to share that after about a year search, we brought on an outreach specialist, that I think is about 3 or 4 weeks now in the field. They spend about 2 to 3 weeks training with our various teams throughout the state. And so we're still working on putting together our data. We were hoping to have it together, to kind of share some preliminary data today, but we're looking forward to sharing out some of the data to help kind of inform the conversation around the numbers and the activity that we're seeing in the immediate community that PATH is responsible for covering for the CUP. But we're very excited to share that. I think it's gonna help make these conversations much more productive. But what we will share for the time being is that our outreach specialist Odin is already coordinated with Good Samaritan and CityNet in terms of how we're doing outreach, and is already engaged with about 40 individuals and providing case management to 11 of the 40, and has already connected folks to shelter, and has actually reconnected some folks to family members that live outside of the community. So just within a short week of period, we're already seeing some pretty great results and success stories, and we're looking forward to sharing out some more data with the group in the future.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that. And so what we're hoping to as well in these RAP meetings, so we have the State Street and Waterfront RAP, the East Side RAP, and then the All Call RAP, is really dedicating those spaces to talk about those immediate needs, and really, share, or having the community give us a feedback and Chris's report is so important to really kind of see where those encampments are. So then we can have that conversation amongst outreach of how we can go to those areas and support, and then talk about the needs that we're seeing within those regions. So I know just in some of our previous conversations, we're seeing a lot of mental health needs support that is going to take a different approach than just that general outreach approach, as well as substance use. So those are just some challenges that we're seeing in every region, and we're hoping to kind of refocus some of those RAP meetings to just have that dialogue and really work with outreach providers to support those clients in those areas. So we look forward to those meetings that you all should be receiving calendar invites for, and are more than welcome to participate. So in terms of outreach, I don't know if there's any other questions or comments, or just if anyone wants to bring anything else up. All right, well, thank you. So now we can move on to our next portion, which is the shelter survey results. This is where I'll have Landon kind of take over, but for everyone, I apologize for those that have already seen it a couple of times. I know there's a few of you on here that haven't, so we look forward to sharing this information, getting some feedback. But just a little bit about the shelter survey. This was actually something that was suggested and really advocated upon by our lived experience working group. They were the ones that were really facilitating the conversation around, the shelter system, and, why is it that some folks don't want to go there, and how we can understand why, and, ultimately try to change some of, whatever's deterring individuals from wanting to access these services. So we were able to work with local shelter providers, PATH, Rescue Mission, Good Samaritan, Salvation Army. We actually did work with Good Samaritan with Dignity Moves and Transition House and domestic violence shelters here in town. So they all participated and were able to dedicate some time to complete the surveys. And so Landon now will share his screen, and then we'll jump into those results.
All right. Is everyone able to see the PowerPoint slides there? Because of the way I'm screen sharing, I may not be able to see your questions as easily, so I'll rely on Catherine to call out if there are any. But do feel free to chime in with any questions or comments as we go. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention this shelter survey happened in big part because of a push from our individuals with lived experience that we work with. Raj Powell and others were really wanted to see this happen and help us to get this off the ground, really helped us form the survey itself. And so this is really something that we see as coming from people who have the lived experience. And so we really wanted to find out the positives and the negatives as much as we could to understand what are we doing well and where do we need to grow. So in total, we surveyed 184 individuals, a little less than 25% of our population experiencing homelessness in the city of Santa Barbara. The demographics, I just wanted to show briefly, they're fairly representative based on our point in time count data from 2022. So I say this just to say that in terms of age, gender identity, ethnicity, and race, we're not more heavily skewed than our population in general. And so we feel fairly confident that these the findings that we have are fairly representative of our population locally. So we did ask of those who took the survey where they stayed the night before. You can see about 64% said that they stayed at a congregate shelter the night before. We had a number that had stayed out on the streets or in temporary housing. And we also asked where they had stayed in the last year. And about 75% told us that in the last year they had stayed in one of our congregate shelters. Also, just terminology-wise, when we talk about congregate shelters, we're talking about where everyone is staying together, as opposed to a non-congregate setting like Dignity Moves, where everyone has their own unit. So, so this survey was really focused on those congregate shelters. So even though we had about 74% said they had stayed at congregate shelter in the last year, you'll see on a later slide, we had a lot of individuals who have stayed at one of our shelters at some point in their lifetime. We had individuals who said they had stayed at Casa Esperanza, for example. So some of these individuals, even if they aren't currently or have not recently stayed at a shelter, they have been around the shelter system. The majority of our folks said that they were experiencing homelessness by themselves. We did get a small sampling who were staying with a family or domestic partner, including several, close to 30 who are staying at or who had experience staying at transition house with a family or partner. And about 90% of those who took the survey said they had used shelter services at some point in the city of Santa Barbara. So it could be any point in their lifetime. And we did make it really clear that when we were talking about shelter services, we weren't only referring to staying overnight. We know that some of our shelters offer just a meal if someone wants it. So we included that even if they've just gone to a shelter and gotten a meal or a shower, that would count as having utilized shelter services. But we also did want to get surveys from people who have not stayed in our shelters or people who maybe they had in the past but are actively avoiding them now, because we really want to hear, why is that? You know, why are you avoiding the shelters locally? So of those that we surveyed, a little more than 60% have stayed at the rescue mission at some point. A little more than 50% had stayed at PATH at some point. About 27% at Salvation Army. About 18% at Transition House, and so on. If you're not familiar, Noah's Anchorage is our local youth shelter as well. And then under other, that's where we had some people mention they stayed at Casa Esperanza. Others said Dignity Moves or other maybe non-traditional shelters or non-congregate shelter settings. I also just want to throw out big kudos to all of our shelter providers for helping us to administer the survey. We really appreciate it. This is why we were able to get the sample size that we got. And so we asked how recently they've utilized shelter services, whether or not they had stayed at a shelter, and about 60% said that in the last night they had, whereas close to about 85% had stayed at a shelter within the last 6 months, or had utilized shelter services, I should say. We also asked what kind of services they'd used. Meals was the most common, more than 90%, followed by showers at about 87%, and then overnight stays at 76%. We only had 7 individuals who responded saying they had never, ever utilized shelter services in the city of Santa Barbara. As I mentioned, we did have a lot more individuals who said, maybe I'm not staying at a shelter now, but I have in the past. And so we did ask why, but I'm not going to get into this now because there was only a small sample size of the folks who had never stayed at any of the Santa Barbara city shelters. So now we'll get into the actual feedback about our shelters. And I want to be really clear, we did not ask any shelter specific questions. So at no point did we ask, tell us what you liked and didn't like about PATH. We just asked in general, what have been the positives and the negatives about your experience in the shelters locally. We were able to filter some of the findings so we could see how people who have stayed at PATH responded, but that didn't necessarily mean they were only talking about PATH, because they had also stayed at Rescue Mission, for example. But for today, we're just going to go over the general findings because it's a little easier to summarize. So first of all, we wanted to talk about the positives. We asked what were the top 5 things that made you feel the most comfortable in a shelter setting. And we actually offered a list of about 20 things, everything from having a clean sleeping area to having good food to feeling like the individuals felt fairly treated based on their gender expression or identity, to saying they had effective locked storage, etc. So of those 20 things, these were the top 5 most commonly chosen. I have the full list that I can share as well, but it's a little hard to read if you have all 20 on the screen. So the number 1 was staff and volunteers. We do want to give a big shout out to all of our staff. We had a couple people that wrote in the comments that they've realized how hard it must be to be on staff at a shelter. And so they were grateful for the staff. So more than half of the individuals said, staff and volunteers, they also said that they found it to be a welcoming environment in our local shelters, followed by having a clean sleeping area, sense of safety, and having good food. We can share out, we're recording this meeting right now, but we can share out these slides afterwards as well. So then we asked about the negatives, and we asked what made individuals feel less comfortable in a shelter setting. And again, similar to before, we gave them about 20 options. These were the top 5 most frequently chosen. What's interesting to note, you can see that the bars are much shorter on this slide. And that's because out of the 20 options, the responses were a lot more diffuse. Whereas there was a lot more agreement about the things that made people feel comfortable, it was a lot more spread out in terms of the things that made people feel uncomfortable. But that having been said, close to 30% indicated that the idea of a communal sleeping area, not having privacy between the beds, was the thing that made them feel the most uncomfortable. Use of drugs and alcohol in or around the shelter setting, having a strict curfew, feeling unsafe, and then under other, a lot of individuals mentioned that even though shelters might have locked storage, they still found that there was theft. A few others mentioned feeling judged by other individuals staying at the shelter, or that they found it difficult to maintain their own sobriety when they were around other individuals who maybe were not as serious about that. And I do just want to say as well that the County of Santa Barbara had done a survey asking individuals why they avoided shelters in the last year, and that communal sleeping area was actually one of their #1 findings as well. So we see that consistently throughout Santa Barbara County. We asked about their sense of safety. We had about 20% indicated that they felt some degree of unsafe at the shelters, whether it was moderately or very unsafe. And about 60% indicated they felt some degree of safety at the shelters. About 20% there felt neutral. So when we asked them what kind of things would make people feel more open to accepting a referral to a shelter environment, because we all know that there's many individuals who say, I don't want to go to that shelter or this shelter for a variety of reasons. And so when asked, individuals said having private showers was the most commonly chosen thing to make them more open, followed by having those separation between the sleeping quarters, as I mentioned, that non-congregate style. Feeling supported in their personal goals and priorities, having a locked storage area or secure storage lockers, or other. And again, this is where people mention things like the safety around theft. Some individuals also mentioned having a little bit more enforcement of rules and regulations, having rules and regulations handed out to all guests as they arrive. And then we asked, what types of additional services would you like to see in a shelter environment? The #1 was transportation services to or from the shelter sites. We had a number of individuals who stated that they felt like the shelters were out of the way or difficult to access. Having more access to housing services in the shelter setting. A couple folks said there are housing services on site, and yet sometimes they didn't feel like they were able to progress to the next level. They felt like the housing services offered were only able to take them so far. The ability to stay at or around the shelter for longer hours, for example, being able to stay at the property all day, or recreational areas. We did get quite a bit of qualitative data as well. This is just a sampling of some of the quotes that I'll leave on the screen for a minute for you to take a look at. But you can see it was a smattering of positive and negative. We had some individuals who really expressed a lot of gratitude for our shelter providers, and then some really specific comments about things that they wanted to see improved. And I'll just leave this up for a second for you to read before we'll go to discussion. right. So I just want to open it up. I'd love to hear any reactions, especially from those of you who are new to seeing this data, or hear any questions.
And maybe I can start us off too, just some of the feedback when we initially shared this amongst the shelter providers was a feeling of kind of relief where some of this information wasn't necessarily new to them. They kind of knew just in working with their clients at the shelter that they had these feelings around, curfew, for example. But now having it in this form, kind of on paper, really something that we can use and, look back at, they were excited about. But a lot of the information, the results that they were seeing wasn't necessarily new to a lot of the providers. And I don't know, I think Kevin, I think you're still on the call if you maybe wanted to speak a little bit to that as well.
Yeah, I think it was great. It's always good to hear what the folks you're serving think about what you're doing, because sometimes there's a disconnect between what we're doing and what they're receiving. And I think this is a great way for us to pay attention to those things that are on this questionnaire to work on. When you're dealing with folks who are broken and hurt, you're always going to have issues. But I think that trying to respond compassionately and lovingly to their issues is something that we want to try to continue to do. And definitely as a staff and as a team, we're looking at how we can make things better for them. We probably will not run out and buy a bunch of Andes chocolate mints and put them on their pillows. But who knows? We want to, serve them, and part of that is, that structured compassion and how we want to just treat them, and yeah. So I think thank you so much, SB Act, for this. We are already starting to look at some of our policies and procedures to see how we can make things a little bit more or less institutional within the congregate shelter system, and because I think that would be a huge help. And so thank you for what you're doing.
I see a question about whether a prior similar survey had been conducted. Not that I'm aware of. I don't know. I think in talking to our shelter providers, they had said that they'd wanted to do something like this for a while, but I'm not sure if there's others. I think I see a hand raised from Jonathan.
Hi, sorry about that. My meeting ended early, so I was able to hop back on. I wanted to echo what Kevin shared, that I'm very appreciative of this survey because it really uplifts the voices of the people that we serve. And I think it really also provides insight that people who are unsheltered really want the help, and they're clearly outlining to us what would be more helpful to them in terms of the supportive services made available to the in the shelter, and in terms of their safety and space. And so I think, I just want to share, I hope that as we look for both congregate and non-congregate solutions and services as we move forward, that I hope this survey continues to inform the service models that we create.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
Thank you, Jonathan. And with that, I think it is really important for us to share kind of what are we going to do with this data now that we have it. And so from our end, we have a couple more audiences we want to share this with. We are going to be sharing this back with the Lived Experience Working Group. We really want to get this back into the hands of the people who took the survey as best we can. And so we'll be working with them on that. We also want to share this with local funders as well, just so that they're aware of, like, these are some of the specific things that it would be great to grow if we can find the resources for them. And then we also want to continue sharing with all of our local agencies. We'll be sharing at the Elected Leaders Forum in the coming weeks with the county. in terms of action steps, then we will be working with the shelter providers to figure out what is each individual shelter's kind of action plan out of this, using the feedback that they gathered. And then to Rich Block's question, I think there is that long-term step of how do we keep this going as a regular recurring thing so that we can see what the trends are over time. And so we'll have more to report back at in the coming months about where we're going with that. Any other questions or feedback? All right, I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
Y'all are too easy, but appreciate it. Well, yeah, so I mean, I think this is where we are. You'll have a couple of more minutes back to your day, but we really appreciate everyone being here. And just like I said, I think we're really looking to refocus the RAPs to really work with our outreach providers and discussing and planning out the regional needs and how we can support different neighborhoods like State Street and Waterfront and the East Side. And it's something that, we're starting specifically on the East Side, but are looking to really duplicate those efforts throughout the city and just keep reporting to you all the progress that's being made and hearing from your concerns. I think that's the biggest thing is, a lot of this work can't happen without that encampment link, without everyone going to and inputting what they're seeing in that link and communicating with us on a regular basis of kind of where that need is, just some trends that you all are seeing, and then for us to be able to work with outreach providers to respond to those needs. So we look forward to just this ongoing collaboration and working with you all. If there's nothing else, then we will leave you for your day then, and we will see you in a month. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody.